Hi, welcome to Stories from My Drinking Days. My name's Harry Fell and I'm the founder of No Low Cocktails and Bars. Today we are joined by Ryan Parke, who is known as the men's coach. Really excited to have you here, Ryan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Harry. I'm really excited to be here.
Good. So I first saw Ryan speak actually at a Be Inspired event, all about his work and the science behind it. But actually, what we're going to talk about today is slightly different. We're going to talk about your journey with alcohol. So tell us, do you remember having your first alcoholic drink?
I remember the first time, Harry, that I was drunk. And that was, I think, my 16th birthday. And I had drunk a decent amount of Jack Daniels. Actually, before that, I'd drunk beer before, but that just made me sick. So I decided drinking wasn't for me. And then I discovered whiskey and I thought, actually, maybe I could get into this. But it's quite funny, Harry. I wasn't really into drinking from when I started around sort of 16 until my early 20s. I would often be the designated driver on a night out. And I would sometimes go to the pub where everyone else was drinking. And I would maybe have one or maybe not drink. And then it was my early 20s where that completely changed and drinking became a key part of my identity, my social life, and my idea of who I was as a person.
And what do you think made that change then?
The biggest change is when I was 20, 21 or 22. Me, my brother, and a really good friend of ours, we went on this banger rally where we bought a £333 Mercedes C-Class. We spray painted it black and white like a police car, and we drove through 12 countries in Europe in 12 days. And we had so much fun. And look, everyone on that rally, out of like sort of 64 teams and 180 people, we were all drunk every night. And I started to discover actually alcohol could be pretty fun. And we were going, especially through Eastern Europe, where the spirits were really good and they were really cheap. And then off the back of that, when I got back to the UK, I'd had so much fun exploring Europe that I actually quit my job and decided I was going to go and be a ski rep in Austria. And I was a ski rep in Austria. I did it for one season.
Yeah.
And what I thought, Harry, is that I would get out there and I would be partying all the time and I'd be making friends. I did both those things, but the reality of it was I got a bit of a reputation in my company as someone who you could send to a resort that wasn't doing well and I would fix it because I was very conscientious. And I'd been in sales for 4 years at that point. So I'd go in and I'd go, well, here's the problem. We need a better product. We need to change it. So I used to get sent from failing resort to failing resort and I used to fix them. And this led to me working. I'm not exaggerating to say that there were days where I'd work 20 hours a day and sleep 3. And it was really quite depressing. And it was dark because it's winter.
Yeah.
And the way that I got through that was drinking alcohol while I was out because I had to be sociable with my guests. And when I was at home on my own, like, writing leaflets and information for our guests to try and fix the resort, give people better communications in resort, I would just drink on my own. And by the end of the season, I had managed to have 5 months where I'd not just been drinking, but probably been drunk every day. And it was a coping mechanism to get me through a really tough, lonely point of my life where I knew everyone relied on me, or I felt everyone relied on me, and I didn't want to let anyone down.
Yeah, that's quite a different experience to most ski reps as well. So I've ski repped 3 seasons in my 20s. But obviously I wasn't conscientious enough to be sent to failing resorts. So I just did the work hard, party hard in resort. So and I think, to be honest, it sounds a bit more fun than what you had. I can see why you only did 1 season and didn't want to go back.
I couldn't have done it again. Honestly, no. I drank so much, I worked so hard, I ate so little, I slept so little. I physically couldn't have gone and done it again. But I know if I did do it again, I was a bit unlucky, and it was a bit of a mix of my personality at the time and the challenges that were available within the company. If I'd have worked for a different company in the same resort, I would have been partying and, skiing with guests and just enjoying myself. But our particular company had some challenges.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you didn't ski much either then.
I only skied once or twice a week. I only skied with guests. The whole season I skied, I think, twice on a day off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is, for anyone listening, that is not a normal ski rep experience.
Not at all.
Yeah. Where normally we'd be skiing sort of 6 days a week. The only day you wouldn't be able to ski would be on changeover day on a Saturday. You could never ever ski on a Saturday, but apart from that, we would ski most days. So what did you do then when you came back from the ski season?
So when I came back from the ski season, I had actually kind of enjoyed it in a way, because it was nice, like pushing myself to this limit and seeing what happened. But what I did after that is I did a couple of sales jobs, but nothing ticked. And then eventually an old boss of mine got in touch and said, "Do you know anything about car finance?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Do you want to set up a car finance business with me?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." So we set up this company together, and I co-founded and ran a car finance company for 6 years. It was just under 6 years. And I actually recreated the scenario I'd been in Austria, which was we had this fledgling company. We needed to hire people. We needed to grow it. And I fell into the exact same pattern, which was, well, actually, rather than hiring too soon, I could just do 3 jobs. And if I was to drink all evening, then I can still create the sales material and reply to all the emails. So I actually carried on the trick I'd learned in Austria, which I thought at the time was a productivity hack, which was to drink all evening. Like if I wanted to write sales material, I would drink vodka and Coke, because that would like get me in the right mood. If I got a complaint and I had to handle a complaint that one of my team had caused, or sometimes I had caused, I used to find that really upsetting, because I knew how much work me and my team had gone to, and some people complain for no reason. And so when I had to handle a complaint, I would revert to red wine, because that would get me more drunk and would soothe the pain of someone complaining with my team who did nothing wrong. So throughout my 20s, I was working really hard, using alcohol as a way to party hard as well, because I've had this stressful week. I need to go out and I'm going to drink at the weekend, and luckily that's perfectly normal for lots of people. But what no one saw is that I'd also been drinking all week to get through work as well. So it kind of really ramped up and ramped up and ramped up. And by my late 20s, I was the guy who would turn up to a barbecue, get the host's partner's name wrong, and say offensive things, and generally just not be very nice, because of the fact that by the time I got to the barbecue or the party, I'd already been drinking for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I wasn't arriving sober and being like, "Oh, it's nice to know you." I was literally rocking up out of a taxi, completely drunk, and just being a general idiot, basically. That's the state I got to by the time I was about 27, 28.
Right. Okay. And so what made you change your drinking habits then?
So in November 2018, I went on a kite surfing holiday with a good friend of mine who lives in Germany and her friends. And I was the only English guy, and it was a lot of fun. We went to Brazil. And I was so kite surfing, for anyone who doesn't know, because there's a lot of water sports that are very similar. Kite surfing is where you basically strap yourself to an enormous kite and you jump on a board that looks a bit like a surfboard, and you go out to sea. And it's a lot of fun because you can sail like a boat, and you can jump and twist the kite, and you're basically a cross between a boat and a helicopter. It's really amazing experience. So I was getting into kite surfing, and I was about a week into learning, and there was an opportunity to do a thing called a downwinder. Now, a downwinder is when you start somewhere on the coast and you follow the direction of the wind to another location. So it's quite an easy way to travel, because the weather, the wind is pulling you in the right direction. But as I was still learning to kite, it's not a particularly safe or sensible thing to do. However, the night before, we went out, had a few drinks, and I decided I was going to join everyone tomorrow on a 10-kilometer downwinder. And a couple of people sort of said, "Is that a good idea?" And I said, "Well, look, if it gets bad, I'll swallow my pride. I'll come into the beach, I'll pack up, and I'll go home." So the next morning, we are getting ready for this downwinder. I'm pumping up my kite, and I'm thinking, I've kind of got a moment here to turn back if I want, but I thought, nah, it's fine, I'll be all right. About an hour and a half later, I was halfway on the journey between this one place called Cambuco and another place called Praia in Brazil. Anyway, so I'm about halfway there. But what I hadn't noticed, because I wasn't skilled enough, is the wind was really dying to the point where I was having to whip my kite around to generate any energy. Everyone in the group had gone on because they were much more experienced than me, except for one friend. She was hanging around to make sure I was okay, but she couldn't get close enough to talk to me because we didn't have enough wind to be very mobile. And what I didn't realize at the time, Harry, is the sea wasn't flat anymore. I was riding up and down these 50-foot, I can only describe them as lumps of water. They weren't waves, they were just lumps like hills. I was riding up, then I was riding down. And when I was in between them, sometimes the water was so high that I couldn't see my kite anymore. But I didn't think anything was wrong because I didn't know what it was. And what was happening is I was riding into a storm, and we were so far out at sea that, close to the sea, you get waves, but out at sea, you just get these big lumps of water that didn't, to me, look like waves. I was whipping my kite around, and eventually I couldn't generate enough energy. The wind totally died. My kite just stalled, fluttered, and crashed into the sea. So what you do in that situation is you perform an action called a deep sea pack down, which is where you pack up your kit in a safe way. You can't just swim to the kite. Yes, it's the only thing that floats for probably miles in the sea. I knew I could see the shore if the water was flat. I also knew I was probably at least half a mile out. So I need to perform a deep sea pack down. You can't just swim to your kite because you're attached to it by like 60-foot leads, by wires basically. If you just swim to your kite, then they'll droop and touch the bottom of the sea. And if they hook on something, then the kite goes up and you go down. So it's not safe to swim to your kite. So I'm doing what's called this deep sea pack down, which is where you wind the lines in a certain way. But it was really hard because the kite was getting pulled away from me. And on my third attempt, I was about halfway to the kite. And then the lines, the bar that's in the lines, all got pulled away from me. And I never got it back because what happened is the kite had moved out of the lumps and into the waves and was now getting pulled towards the beach, which sounds good. But the downside is this meant I now had no control whatsoever over the kite, which was getting pulled along. And it's really hard to stay afloat when you're in the sea I had no life jacket. I was in the sea with no lifeguard. I was a long way out to sea. The nearest beach had no people on it. It was 5 kilometers from the nearest town and no phone signal. There was no hope of anyone seeing me, even if people knew roughly where I was. And now I've lost control of the kite and it's getting pulled through the water. The kite, I'd actually done a really stupid rookie thing, and I'd attached what's called the second safety, which is the last line that attaches you to the kite. I'd attached it to my back. So if you're ever going to go kite surfing, don't do that, because the line attached to my back meant I was dragged underwater behind the kite like a torpedo. So while I was getting dragged, I realized that I was going to have to do what you never want to do in a bad situation. I was going to have to detach myself from the only thing that floated in the sea, the only thing that a helicopter would spot, the only thing a lifeguard would ever possibly see after the storm ended is the kite. And I was going to have to detach myself from the kite, because if I don't, the kite's going to drown me. And as I was dragged along, I remember my hand touching the small of my back, going down there, holding the belt that was attached to me. and my fingers moved across away from me, and they hovered over this little button, which if I press it, it will do what kiters refer to as deploy the second stage safety, which means I'm no longer going to be attached to the kite and I'll have to swim for my life. Now, in this moment, you're full of adrenaline and your brain actually makes some pretty quick decisions and calculations. I was really surprised. And what my brain said to me is, if you detach yourself from the kite, you've got to swim for your life. If the tide's currently going out, you'll never make it to the beach. You don't know whether the tide's going out or coming in. So that means you have a 50-50 chance of survival. You need the tide to be coming in, really. If you swim in, because I couldn't see the beach at this point, remember, if you swim in and you swim into a 200-foot vertical cliff face, you'll be drowned against the rocks. So my brain's sort of working out, let's say it's 50-50 whether the tide's going in or out, and it's 50-50 whether it's safe to swim in. I've worked out that if I detach myself from the kite, I have a 25% chance of survival, roughly. If I don't detach myself from the kite, I'll drown in the next 60 seconds. And at that moment where I realized how slim it was that I was going to live, I realized that if I drowned in the sea, I would be remembered as the drunk idiot at barbecues who got people's names wrong and said ridiculous things and was bossy when he was drunk, and probably also said like unacceptable, like sexist things because I was drunk. And do you know what I mean? Like I thought, I'm going to be remembered as basically this asshole and the world's going to be better off without me. And I thought, I can't die that way. And if I make it to the beach, I also can't live that way. And so I decided I'm going to get to the beach. And when I get to the beach, I'm going to make sure that I learn from this. So I squeezed the second stage safety and it boom, twanged away from me. And in that second, I realized that what happens now is down to me to some degree. It's also down to the sea and the friggin' what beach I come into and which way the tide's going. But there's a little bit that's within my control. The only thing I can control is how hard I swim. And I swam forward as fast as I could. And what happens then is I'm in this sea of 2-meter high waves with no life jacket. So as soon as I surfaced after getting dragged along under the kite, a 2-meter high wave would go over my head. And I was just in a washing machine. I would be upside down, facing the wrong way. So I'd have to work out which way is up. And then I'd have to swim up. And then the first time I swam up and gasped a breath of air, I was facing the wrong way and another wave hit me straight in the face. After a while, probably 30 seconds or something, I started to get good at working out which way was up. And then I was regularly coming up and regularly spinning around and starting to swim before the next wave came along. Then I got really good at swimming, even though a wave would come. I would kind of use the wave to move me forwards, a bit like a surfer without a surfboard. And I remember there was a moment where I was kind of in this state of being high as anything on adrenaline, swimming as hard as I possibly could. And I'd got to a stage where the waves were like 2-meter high walls. They were perfectly tall and smooth, and they were all moving away from me towards the beach. And there was a brief moment, about 15 seconds in between getting hit with another wave where I was just swimming as hard as I could. And I remember the setting sun was shining off the back of the walls of waves ahead of me. And I remember thinking, if I die, and I still at that stage felt like I was probably going to die, but if I die and when I die, at least this last thing I see is so beautiful. Like what an amazing thing to see. How lucky I am to be here. And I carried on swimming and getting thrown around in the waves. And then eventually over the top of one of the waves, I could see the tops of trees. And I thought, this means the tide's coming in.
Yeah.
So I've just got to keep swimming. And eventually, over time, I was starting to see more and more of the tops of trees. And then I saw some actual trunks. And I was like, I really am coming in. This bad dream is about to end. Then, eventually, I saw the tops of some yellow sand, no cliffs. And eventually I got to a stage where when I was swimming in, and I saw my friend, and she was running along the beach to try and find me. She'd seen the kite had come in. She'd seen my board had come in. They were both at the beach probably 10 minutes before me. She'd seen all my kit had come in, but she hadn't seen me. And she knew how inexperienced I was. So she was very worried. And as I was swimming in, I saw her and I thought, if she's in and she can walk, that means she's alive. She's not unconscious. She's not broken any limbs. If she can do it, I can also do it. And as I neared the beach, I had a moment where I kind of decided I want to see if I could touch the bottom. So I held my breath, and as a wave went over, I pushed myself under the water and I reached out my toes to touch the bottom, and there was still no bottom there. I was like, for God's sake, how long is this going to take? But a couple of minutes later, I was actually walking out the sea. And what happens when you get all that adrenaline dumped at once inside you is once the actual danger's gone, you end up in this hysterical state where all I could do was laugh, and I couldn't stop laughing. I was chuckling about this whole experience for probably 24 hours, just from the adrenaline and the stress hormones that were in my system. My friend came running down the beach, and we grabbed hold of each other and had a big hug. And she was like, oh my God, are you okay? And I remember saying, I've never felt better. That was incredible. That was an amazing experience. So we hitched a ride back to Kumbuku. We met up with our friends. My kiting equipment was wrecked. I had to pay quite a decent amount of money to get it all fixed. I can't remember whether it was hundreds or thousands of euros, but I remember thinking I could have a skiing holiday for that. Yeah. So we'd paid this money to get the gear done, but I didn't care. I was riding on such a high. I didn't, though, make any decisions about drinking at the time. All I knew is that when I was going to die, I realized that I'd be remembered as this asshole, basically. And then a couple of weeks later, it was the morning of New Year's Day. So this was New Year's Day. This was the last day of 2018. And I had a different partner at the time. I'm now married to my wife, Emma, but at the time I had a different partner. And she said, you like to do New Year's resolutions. What are you going to do this year? And I said, well, I've been thinking that maybe I should give up drinking for a little bit. And I'm actually going to be sober until I'm 30, which is going to be 16 months of being sober. And she said something like, okay, cool. I'll completely support you. But just so you know, you do drink every day and you drink a lot every day, but I'll completely support you. And we went out. One of the things I did just before New Year's is I actually wrote a poem and stuck it on Facebook about how I was going to be sober. And that meant I now had accountability locked in. I had told everyone on Facebook I was going to be sober for 16 months. So now it's like, I've got to go back on my word. And there's a part of my fragile masculinity that realized I just couldn't go back on that. I had to stick with it. We went out. We got to a club about midnight. We queued, and at 2 minutes to midnight, we got served. And we ordered 2 double vodka Red Bulls and 2 of these terrible cocktails. It was meant to be like a Long Island iced tea, but it had champagne instead of Coke because it was New Year's. I started drinking this terrible cocktail, slammed it down. I was like, I can't have that. So I said to my partner, can I have your 2 double vodka Cokes? And she's like, yeah, sure. So I necked them both, slammed them both down on the table, and I've never drank since, and I never will. And that was my last drink.
Wow, that's amazing. Your experience kite surfing sounds truly terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. But that's really interesting that sort of coming face to face with your mortality really made you look at the life you were leading and decide to change it. So what did people say when you put your Facebook post up saying you were going to go sober?
I had a lot of surprise, a lot of surprise. The poem that I wrote, it was quite long, but it was quite nice. I actually got it for this interview just in case, but the poem that I wrote, it was quite nice. And every now and again I'd go places and people would say, could you read it out? So
I think you're going to have to read it to us, right?
I thought I'd get it just in case. Okay, do you want to hear it, Harry?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, bear in mind, I'm not a poet. I've written 3 or 4 poems in my life. I just, every now and again in my life, I've just thought, I just need to write about this. And this one happened to rhyme. So But I'll read it to you because it is the essence of the mood I was in at the time and what I was thinking about and where I wanted to take this.
Yeah.
Put down your beer and listen here. It's the right time to think, a brand new year. We all love a drink, big or small, but I've written this poem to alcohol. I started out a little short and shy, couldn't talk to strangers nor look them in the eye. I was terrible with girls, didn't impress them, I think, until I learned the magic of having a drink. Then the nerves turn to guts and your mouth really starts up. You're not bothered by manners, you don't give a damn, and the years that follow turn you into a man. When I look back now, I'm not even sure. If I wasn't drinking, would I have just been a bore? These are the questions that play in my head. Was I really the heart and soul, or was it the drink instead? I thought I was funny and clever too. When I met new people, I knew just what to do. When I replay now all the daft things I said, the more I would drink, the more I'd regret. My ego would grow and I'd say things for show. If I wasn't sure, I'd just pretend that I know. I'd take life for granted. I wouldn't give a damn, but that's not how I want to be remembered, because that's not who I am. I used to party all night, could talk my way out of any fight. When answering questions, I knew just how to respond, but didn't know the best thing about me was me all along. Time just flies by unless you grab it with both hands. I need to make a decision to decide who I am. Is this buzz me? Who am I without it? I'd be a much better man if I could learn to listen and not shout it. A path lays ahead for me if I can be brave. I can choose to be the one making the most of every night and day. Reasons to drink? Yeah, there'll be plenty. But tonight I'll have my last drink till 20 past 9 p.m. on the 3rd of April, 2020.
Brilliant.
And then I never drank since. There was a turning point about 3 weeks in. And actually, I replicate that turning point when I work with guys in my coaching program, because every man I work with has to go through 21 days sober, and people might say, well, this isn't Alcoholics Anonymous, why are you doing that? But actually the lessons that you learn from being sober in a world that's so keen on drinking alcohol is very, very powerful and required for any change that you want to have in life. If you can practice being sober in a world that wants you to drink alcohol, then there isn't much that you can't achieve.
Wow. I love that poem. That's amazing. So April 2020 was the date that you mentioned. That was going to be your 30th birthday, was it?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So you had every intention of drinking again on your birthday.
100%. My plan was to do a bit of a detox to prove I could. And my plan was on my 30th birthday to be somewhere amazing in the world and have the best Bloody Mary cocktail that I could possibly afford.
Yeah. And instead we were in lockdown, weren't we? So
yeah.
So your birthday wasn't what you intended at all.
So yeah, we were in lockdown as well. Yeah. And just things changed though. I started to see the first thing you notice is the disadvantages of drinking are gone. And then there's advantages of not drinking, of being sober, that no one tells you about. You really don't realize until you've been sober for a couple of months. You do hear little whispers sometimes of some advantages of being sober, but they're very small, sort of tactical advantages. People talk about not having a hangover, and ingesting less crap and hanging out with less people that you don't like. But they're very small advantages of being sober compared to the real advantage of being sober, which is much more strategic. It's that, this is what I found anyway. If you're drunk for a decent portion of your life, that means a certain percentage of the decisions that you make are being made by a person who's drunk. Now, you wouldn't want a drunk person to make any decisions for you, but sometimes we're drunk making decisions for ourselves. And so what happens after like 6 months of sobriety or a year or 2 years of sobriety is you start to get into this position where every decision that you've made for the last 6 months or a year, you are 100% sober when you made that decision. And even if you are just 1% better at making decisions when you're sober, you get this enormous compound effect where every decision you've made for the last couple of years, you are 1% better than you used to be. And it adds up throughout your life. And you get to the stage where you have changed careers, you've changed partners, you're generally happy in life, you've made all kinds of big life decisions, and you're starting to be nice at parties, and you can be social and you can tell jokes and not be drunk. And you start to realize that actually we are all set up to drink alcohol because it makes us better consumers, it makes us make worse decisions. You know, it makes us unhealthy, and then we need drugs that if we don't pay for, the NHS has to pay for. And actually going sober for me was the first step to actually consciously living and learning to think about and respect just how precious life was.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. I definitely concentrated more on the no hangovers. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Easy wins. So, you gave up drinking almost 5 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, it will be 5 years on New Year's Eve.
Way. And were you still working in the car finance business at that point?
I was at that point, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, obviously you became sober and then you changed your career. Tell us about how you got into being the men's coach.
Yeah, really lovely. Well, so I stopped drinking beginning of 2019. I carried on working where I was in the company. I'd grown it at that stage. I'd grown it to the point where I think there were around a dozen of us. You know, I had a lot of direct reports. I was very stressed. And the nice thing about when I stopped drinking is I realized that I couldn't escape the stresses in my life anymore. I had to actually deal with them. And then how are we doing for time? Can I tell the story of
Yeah,
what
yeah,
we used to
yeah,
be in the
yeah.
men's coach? Yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
definitely.
I don't want you to accidentally end up with a 6.5-hour podcast.
I know you're fine, Ryan. Thank you.
So then it was June 2019. It was a Sunday, and I bumped into a lady who I hadn't seen in years. And I was really excited to hear the latest about her son, because Jenny's son, Brad, was taller than me, more muscular. Some would say slightly better looking. But the important thing to know is that Brad had a fast car, a big house, and a great job. Plus, he was a dad with a loving wife. He was actually in finance, so I kind of thought that I was on the same trajectory as him, but I was just a couple of years behind because of the age difference. Then I saw the look on his mum's face, on Jenny's face, and I thought, oh, I must have offended her. What have I said? And she said, oh my God, Ryan, you're asking me how Brad is. You don't know. Brad's killed himself. Now, I was really taken aback by that for two main reasons, Harry. Reason number one is I had always thought up until that point in my life that when people are successful, they'll be happy. And Brad was easily the most successful person I knew, definitely the most successful person who lived local to me. Reason number two is I'd always heard what we all hear, which is the reason why men have worse outcomes than women when it comes to suicide, at least when it comes to the number of deaths counted, is because men just don't talk. And yet Brad was the most open and articulate man that I knew. In fact, I found out after his death that 2 years before he died, Brad went to the doctors and said, help, I think I'm depressed. I know I'm having thoughts about suicide. Brad's doctor did what doctors are supposed to do, and Brad's doctor referred Brad to talking therapy and prescribed Brad antidepressants. Brad went to talking therapy, took antidepressants, and 2 months before Brad died, his mum, Jenny, who works in mental health, said, Brad, call me every night. Tell me how you feel. You've got to open up. You've got to get your feelings out into the world. That will help. Now, I'm not suggesting that these things didn't help. I'm sure they did. But what really struck me at the time, Harry, is here was a man who had done all the things that we tell men to do, and yet he still wasn't here. And Jenny said to me, Ryan, you should actually learn about this, because every 5 hours, 4 people die from suicide in the UK and Ireland. 3 of them are men. In fact, 1 in 3 of all deaths by suicide is a man aged 45 to 49. So I decided there and then, I took what Jenny said really seriously, and I decided to spend 1 day a week, every week, from June 2019 until the end of the year to learn everything that I could about male mental health. And I did this totally for selfish reasons. I knew that Brad wouldn't want what happened to him to happen to me. And it's the very, very first day where I'm learning about male mental health. I had no idea where to start because I had no medical, no mental health background at the time. So I decided to just ask big questions, assume I knew nothing, and read the scientific studies. And I'm reading on that first day a study about life expectancy in men, and it just happens to mention that there is 1 day every year where heart attacks in men jump up by 30%, and in women on the same day, heart attacks go down significantly. Do you want to guess what day that is, Harry?
Now, I've actually heard this story before.
Yep.
And I still can't completely remember what it is. I think everyone sort of suggested things like Mother's Day and, I'm going to say it's the shortest day of the year.
Good guess, but it's not the right guess. So the most common guesses that I hear is things like Valentine's Day, Christmas Day, that kind of thing. Valentine's Day comes up a lot. So it obviously is a stressful day for some men. I think if you forget Valentine's Day, that might cause a heart attack.
Yeah.
But no, the 1 day of the year where heart attacks jump up so significantly in men and go down so significantly in women is the Monday after the clocks jump forward an hour. So it's not the Monday we've just had in October. It's the one that we have in March where we lose an hour's sleep. And when I knew that, I had to know why. Well, it turns out that missing just 1 hour's sleep lowers a man's testosterone for days. And in a man's body, as testosterone goes down, his chances of having a heart attack go up. And when I heard that, I thought, that's really interesting because my whole life, I had never heard anything positive about testosterone. In fact, I remember when I was a kid and there was a fight in my local pub, my mum's friends used to say, it's no wonder they ended up fighting because in that room there was too much testosterone. So I wondered, how can a hormone that causes fights in pubs also protect men from having a heart attack? I decided next week I'm going to learn about testosterone. So the following week comes my first question: why does testosterone make men aggressive? Turns out testosterone does not make men aggressive. That was disproved decades ago, but unfortunately the PR hasn't caught up with the science. Now, knowing that testosterone isn't bad, I had to know, why does testosterone stop men from having a heart attack? It turns out that not only does testosterone protect a man's heart, it also protects his mental health. The average middle-aged man who is depressed has 30% less testosterone than the average middle-aged man who is not depressed. And then I was really interested. Because that year in 2019, the single biggest killer of men from the age of 18 to 45 was suicide. Now, suicide is the biggest killer of men from 18 to 50 because it keeps going up. But at the time, it was 18 to 45. Suicide in middle-aged men and depression in middle-aged men are both linked to low levels of testosterone. The biggest killer of men that year from the age of 45 to 60 was heart disease. Heart disease, heart failure, and as we've spoken about, heart attacks in men are all associated with having low testosterone. So then I wondered, if all the biggest killers of men from the ages of 18 to 45, 45 to 60 are all associated with having a low level of testosterone, what happens after the age of 60? The biggest killer of men after the age of 60 is cancer. The most likely cancer a man will be diagnosed with is prostate cancer. And Harry, can you guess what is the single biggest indicator a man will be diagnosed with prostate cancer?
I'm going to go with low testosterone.
Yeah, absolutely. And so here I was this was at the end of my second day of learning about male mental health and how the male body works and stuff. And at the end of my second day, just by reading sort of the science that's out there, it became obvious that not only is testosterone not bad, but it's absolutely vital for a man's mental health, physical health, and life expectancy. not only are men not taught that, but worse than that, there's actually stigma associated with testosterone that prevents men from getting useful, relevant, effective information when they're in crisis, because we just don't know about how that hormone works in our body. And I don't just talk about testosterone. What I do now is, yes, that was my first 2 days of learning, but over the next 6 months, I built a framework that would basically use 500 different sources of information on what male mental health is, what are the key warning signs we need to look for, and what are the specific strategies we need to incorporate into our life. And at the end of that period, I'd come to the conclusion that there are 5 dimensions to male mental health. Understanding testosterone is just one of those dimensions. Beginning of 2020, I started working with other men on their mental health. I didn't try to do that. Men just saw that I was much happier, much healthier from balancing these 5 things. And men started approaching me saying, hey, what are you doing? Like, can you show me? So I started coaching men. This was on the side of my day job in sales. But because a key part of my job for 6 years before that had been doing sales coaching, yeah, I'd been hiring my sales team, but I'd also been training and coaching them and managing them as well. And the coaching was the part I enjoyed the most.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, what if I used to have a framework to coach people in sales that I created, which was just based on observation. And I thought, what if I took all these studies and turned it into a framework and just coached guys on that? Well, some of the first men that I worked with had really amazing transformations, not because of me, because of the information. And I carried on working with men in this way for years. Last year, I was really lucky. I got invited to go and give my first TEDx talk about male mental health. And starting in February this year, I've actually been teaming up and collaborating with mental health organizations to make sure that we can provide training for doctors, for therapists, for teachers, for parents, for anyone who wants to support the men in their life better. And so now what I do for a living is, as from November last year, this is my full-time work. It got to the point where I was turning down opportunities to speak and to coach all the time. And it just got to a point where I spoke to my now wife, Emma, and she said, you have to do this, Ryan. This is what you were made to do. It makes you so happy. The guys that you work with have really, really good transformations. All you've got to worry about is, can you make it pay the bills? And she said, what's the point in being in sales for 14 years if you can't sell? So she said, why don't you sell it? And that was a really lovely moment. So yeah, what I do now is I share the science of male mental health in talks, in workshops, and in my coaching program, which is called the Future Self Program, so that we never have to lose any more of the men we care about to suicide.
That it's such a worthwhile thing you're doing, and I think it's it's such a big problem, isn't it, in society, men's mental health, and this whole idea that you're a man, you've got to be macho, and people don't like talking about it. Although one of the things I found really interesting about your talk was the fact that actually we always say that people need to talk about it, but that's not what you found helps men the most. So tell us a bit about actually, if we do have someone in our lives that a man in our lives that is depressed, what is the best way to help them?
Cool. Lovely question. So just taking it back to hormones again for a moment, there's a really key hormone that causes a lot of misunderstandings in life, and it's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is released when we touch, cuddle, hold hands, when we talk about how we feel. And if you're female, oxytocin lowers your stress. This is not unique to humans. If you take other mammals and inject oxytocin into them, their stress goes down if they're female. Oxytocin does not lower stress for males. And this is not just unique to humans. This is across like all mammals. So this means that if you're male, just talking about how you feel does not lower your stress, because talking releases oxytocin. Oxytocin lowers stress for women. So this causes 2 big misconceptions. I regularly see in my coaching practice men who they are at a point of crisis. They've reached out for help, and everyone they speak to says, you've just got to talk about it. Now, people in crisis, I find, are very, very open to whatever you suggest. So if you tell a man you've got to talk about it, he will often talk about it, and he'll be going down the same routes as Brad did, trying to get the same kinds of help. And if he doesn't feel better, he'll be told, no, talking is the solution. You've got to talk more about it. Now, eventually, if this man for months or maybe for longer, like Brad, is talking about how he feels, but is not feeling better, then he might come to a logical but dangerous conclusion, which is if talking is the solution and it's not working for me, then there must be something wrong with me. And the science says, no, there's nothing wrong with you. It's been found in multiple different, very, very good studies that talking is really not therapeutic for men. And so then we kind of want to look at what is. But this also, oxytocin causes another miscommunication, which is if you're male, then your lived experience is that talking about something doesn't on its own always make it better. And so what happens is sometimes men, like I used to not realize just how beneficial talking was for my partner. So like I'm a straight man. So if I'm in a relationship, it's with a woman. So we've got this massive difference in oxytocin where if I have a bad day, I want to fix it. But if my wife Emma has a bad day, she wants to talk about it. And because my lived experience is talking doesn't particularly help, on its own, talking doesn't help, I wouldn't ask Emma how her day was. And if she told me she had a bad day and it was because of the same reason she had a bad day yesterday, I'd just tell her, well, you need to fix it. You need to bar, and bar. And Emma's thinking, no, Ryan, you're not listening to me. So oxytocin causes this big miscommunication, which is it makes women think that men just need to talk because that's their lived experience. It makes men think that women don't need to talk because that's their lived experience. So understanding oxytocin is actually vital for everyone to understand each other better and to support one another better. So then we come to the question, which is, okay, if talking is not the solution for men, then what is? So firstly, I have to make clear that I have this saying that I repeat all the time in my talks, which is talking is vital for everyone, but for men, it is not sufficient. So I'm not saying don't talk. All you need to do is attend a pub or a football game to see that men talk a lot. In fact, one of the biggest complaints about men is often how much they talk. They talk over people in workplaces. It's been found that men are more likely to talk over women than over other men. So it's not true to say men don't talk because there are loads of circumstances where men talk too much. It's also not true to say that men don't express emotion. If you go to a football stadium and one team loses badly, you might see 30,000 men close to tears at once. If that's not like some form of mass therapy, where would you ever see 30,000 women close to tears? Maybe at a pub gig. So if you stop taking what everyone says for granted and look at the evidence, it's like, oh, men do talk. In fact, they talk too much in some circumstances, and they do express emotion. But because men talk and express emotion at different times to women, it's thought of as being wrong. And there isn't any reason to believe it is wrong. It's just we are driven by different hormones, and those hormones have different environmental factors. So now we want to know, okay, what the hell do we do to help men? So 2 years ago, there was a really, really interesting study. And what this study did is they approached survivors of suicide, Harry. So these are people who used to have thoughts about suicide and don't anymore. They interviewed them and said, what made the biggest difference for you? What changed your life? This study found there was some crossover, but generally what allowed women to change their life and men to change their life was different. For women, the single biggest, most effective strategy to escape thoughts about suicide was what's referred to as a psychoeducational approach in a group setting with other women. Okay, so I didn't know what that meant when I first read it. It means learning about and understanding and expressing your emotion. And the reason you do that in a group setting is so there are other women there who can tell you That's valid. The way you feel is completely valid. It's normal, basically. That's also what we get men to do at the moment when they are down, depressed, or having thoughts about suicide. You've got to open up. You've got to share how you feel, and you've got to tell other people so they can tell you, oh, that's totally valid. That was not the most effective thing for men, according to the study. The study found that for men, the most effective strategy to escape thoughts about suicide is to focus on making changes in life towards becoming your ideal self. So what can we learn from that? What we can learn from that is that positive mental health for women is about opening up, expressing how you feel, and hearing the way you feel is valid. Positive mental health for men is about knowing who you want to be and then feeling progress towards becoming that man. And I see examples of this every day. I regularly work with men who they've been feeling depressed for maybe years. They might be having thoughts about suicide at the moment. Everyone tells them you've got to talk. They think there's something wrong with them because talking isn't helping. They've usually tried 2 forms of talking therapy. The doctors in the UK will recommend one-on-one cognitive behavioral therapy. After that, people will start to explore different forms of talking therapy. Actually, CBT is probably the most effective form of talking therapy for men, which is interesting because some therapists argue it's not really talking therapy, it's too practical. So that's something that's quite interesting. CBT is much more effective for women than men, but that's a whole other conversation. So CBT is the most effective form of talking therapy for men. So once men have tried that, they might feel they're drawing dead. And then if we work together and we'll perform some coaching exercises to help them understand where they want to be in the future, you see the mood lift. And then we can look at making some tiny, tiny progress, have a couple of daily check-ins, and a few days later, they're not depressed anymore. Maybe they're not having thoughts about suicide anymore. It's very normal for the thoughts about suicide to go away before the depression. And it's often just from having a plan and sticking to it and making it happen. And so I would never go so far as to say that something like, knowing who you want to be and making progress towards that treats suicide or treats depression. But the evidence is, and my experience is, when you do that, if you're male, the depression and the thoughts about suicide go away, because depression is not a problem. Depression is your body's way of telling you there's a problem. And female mental health is all about connection. Male mental health is all about feeling capable. The worst thing we can do for men is to sympathize with them. Because sometimes what a man hears, if I say, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, that sounds really bad, a man might think, well, the reason why Ryan's sympathizing with me is because he looks down on me. He doesn't think I'm capable. So if I was having a conversation with a guy and he says he's feeling depressed or having thoughts about suicide, I would tend to say something along the lines of, wow, I'm impressed with how strong you are, because lots of people would not tell me that. Like, you literally told me you're having thoughts about suicide, or you literally told me you're depressed. I'm impressed with how strong you are. And straight away, I'll see them like sort of adjust in their seat, like, really? Because they might have been telling everyone that for 6 months. And all they've got so far is, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm sure there are other people who feel that way. And he's probably thinking, yeah, plenty of... Once I was on a call with a man and his wife, and he said he was having thoughts about suicide. And his wife said, I'm sure there are other men who feel this way. And he said, yeah, plenty of losers. Now, I'm not agreeing with him. What I'm saying is his perception at the time as a man in crisis is, I don't want to be seen as weak. So I jumped in and said, I'm really impressed with the fact you've told me, you've told your wife. I said, I'm blown away by that. You're a really strong man. And I heard him stop panting because he's very upset. And I heard him draw a breath. And he said, you think so? I said, yeah. And I said, look, you've said that you're thinking of ending your life. Obviously, you're not going to live forever. So even if you don't end your life, you're still not going to live forever. Given that you're going to die eventually, what would you like to do first? I was trying to get into that mindset of where does he want to be?
Yeah.
He said, well, the things I'd like to do first is this, 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 and this. And I said, well, how can you do that if you end your life? And he said, oh yeah, okay, well, I don't know where to start. I said, well, how do you start? And he said, well, first I'd do that, and I need to do that, and I need to tell this person this. Honestly, 20 minutes into that phone call, he had to go because he was so happy. He had so many things he wanted to do. And yet that's not what you're taught on suicide prevention courses. What we're taught on suicide prevention courses, I believe, works very well with women. I don't think it works with men.
Well, I think it's clear, isn't it? You just look at the statistics that it doesn't work with men, because we wouldn't be losing so many men to suicide if it worked. Because the intervention is there. I know sometimes the intervention, it's hard with the NHS and the mental health services at the moment, but the intervention is there, and yet the deaths still happen.
Yeah. And the specific causes, the specific factors that are proven to be associated with thoughts about suicide in men, 11 years ago, the Samaritan said that the current approach doesn't actually address those psychological factors because they're different in men and in women. And you can see why when you get down to a hormone level. Of course, we have to be different because we've survived for millions and millions of years by working together and working in different ways. And I kind of hope that one of the biggest messages that people get from my talks and from my workshops, because I try and do everything in an inclusive way. I don't want to talk just to men because that would be ridiculous. We all have people who we care about in life who are male. And I remember when Jenny told me about Brad, she said something along the lines of, we often believe that male mental health just affects men. But now, as a mum who's lost my son, Brad had a partner, Brad had kids. All the people whose lives have been devastated by the death of this man, they're not all men. It affects everyone.
Yeah.
And so I really hope that the message that comes out from the research that I've done and from the work that I'm doing and the talks that I give is that, yeah, we're different, but we're equal. And it's only by actually understanding those differences that we can properly support each other.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's brilliant. And I think, what you're doing now is so purpose-led, isn't it? And it's amazing. So you've mentioned, I just want to touch very briefly on, you mentioned 5 things that to concentrate on. And I think, again, you mentioned this in your talk that I saw. I think one was sleep, making sure that, you get the right amount of sleep.
Yep.
And is there a minimum amount or?
So a couple of good questions here. So there are 5 dimensions to mental health. One of those dimensions is understanding how testosterone works. So the things that I spoke about at Be Inspired, they're not the 5 dimensions of male mental health.
Right. Okay.
The 5 dimensions of male mental health are vast. They include things that you would never believe are key to mental health, to male mental health. But given the evidence, they're so key. It explains it explains why male suicide goes up when, industrial output, economic output goes down. It explains why therapies, traditional talking therapies, don't necessarily reduce thoughts about suicide in men. There's a whole framework to explain that. But at Be Inspired, what we did is we looked at the key factors for a healthy level of testosterone.
Right. Yeah.
So the first one we've spoken about, the first one is sleep. It's been found that missing 1 hour of sleep temporarily lowers a man's testosterone by the equivalent of 12 years of aging. So what that means is I'm 33. If I missed 1 hour sleep last night and had just 7 hours sleep, then today I'd have the same level of testosterone as a 45-year-old man who got 8 hours sleep. And if I miss 2 hours sleep, today I'll have the same level of testosterone as a 57-year-old man who got 8 hours sleep. So sleep's the biggest factor. Sleep, what would we suggest? Well, my understanding of the research is 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Might be slightly more if you're female, but not much more than that. It really 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night is the best. And I base that on big long-term studies that looked at life expectancy and heart health. Next thing after sleep, the next most important thing is food. I say food rather than diet because the word diet tends to scare men off. You probably don't need to diet, but you might need to change what food goes in your body. So for a healthy level of testosterone, men need homemade food and loads of green vegetables. actually, one of the things that we do in my coaching program is we look at I call them man fuel. It's like the different food groups. I'm not going to give any recipes. You don't need that. You just need to know, look, this is how often you need fish in your diet. These are the best fish for you. The reason is things like green vegetables and seafood contain loads of vitamins and minerals that act as a bodyguard to testosterone in a man's blood. Then after we've got diet, the next one is exercise. The NHS say you need a minimum of 150 minutes of exercise a week, spread throughout the week. Well, actually, it's been found that if you get 20 to 30 minutes of exercise a day, that's 1.5 times more effective than taking antidepressants and 1.5 times more effective than going to talking therapy.
And that can just be going for a walk, can't it? It's not necessarily going for a run or...
Yes, it's based on moderate exercise. So actually, while walking, especially walking outside, benefits everyone. For lots of people, walking wouldn't actually be moderate exercise. So moderate exercise is when you can still talk, but you couldn't quite sing. So for lots of people, it would actually be something like jogging, not necessarily running. If you weren't used to walking or any exercise, walking would probably be exercise. And you definitely notice an improvement, like 100%. In fact, if the 20 minutes a day scares you, 5 minutes of exercise a day is so much better than 0, because there are lots of processes in our brain and body that don't happen unless we exercise. But unfortunately, life without exercise now is quite normal. It's not right, but it's quite normal.
Yeah.
And then the fourth ingredient for a healthy level of testosterone is vitamin D. And that is the one that's the vitamin our body makes from being in the sun. And actually, once the clocks change, once we're in this winter period, most people are deficient in vitamin D and can benefit from taking vitamin D supplements. It's been found that men who have low testosterone, men who have low levels of vitamin D, have low levels of testosterone, because vitamin D is required for the manufacturing process of testosterone. So for lots of men, maybe getting a vitamin D check, or it's pretty safe to supplement vitamin D. I'm not a nutritionist, but if you ask a nutritionist, they will tell you it's safe to supplement vitamin D during these winter months. If you want to carry on doing it in the summer, you should get a vitamin D test. So obviously, as long as you have an appropriate dosage for your size and weight and all that jazz. And when I learned those 4 things that are vital for a healthy level of testosterone in men, I remember thinking, oh, crap. Because for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is, I knew Brad, and I know that, he did all the things we tell men in crisis to do. He went to the doctors. He took antidepressants. He went to talking therapy. He called his mum every night and told her how he was feeling. But nobody Brad spoke to, not his doctor, not his therapist, not even his family, knew enough about male mental health to realize that Brad was spending all of his time at work, and that sleep, good food, exercise, and sunshine, they just weren't on Brad's list of priorities. I realized at the time they weren't on mine, and that trying to be a man is something that kills a lot of men.
Wow. It's just amazing. I love your work and what you're doing, and I think it's really, really necessary. So how can people find out more, and how can they get in touch with you, Ryan, if they are listening to this and they think, God, I need to work with him. He can really help me.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So this is what I do. I share the science of male mental health in talks, in workshops, and in coaching, so that you never lose the men that you care about to suicide. And if you're thinking, actually, I've identified with some of what Ryan said, I get this, or maybe you just want me to come into work and give a talk, like it's Movember now, but all year round, it can be good to get someone to come into work and deliver this usable information to your team. Then the best way to get hold of me is my website, which is themenscoach.co.uk. So it's themenscoach.co.uk. Fill in the contact form on there, and I'll be in touch probably the very, very next day.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan. It's been absolutely fantastic to talk. I think there's still loads more we could have chatted about and learnt about, but we'll have to do that another day. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Harry, and thanks for asking me such brilliant questions.
That's fine. That's great. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. This has been Stories from My Drinking Days with me, Harry Fell from Nolo Cocktails and Bars, and Ryan Parke. Thank you.